Good morning. We'll be getting started here in a couple minutes, just allowing people to log on. Nice to see some familiar faces, Mary Lou and Yemi. Thanks for joining. Welcome, Bailey. Good to see you again. Well, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. Couple brief introductions. My name is Darren Gale. I'm the Assistant City Manager here with the City of Brentwood. And today is one of our monthly workshops, and we'll be talking about how to negotiate a business lease. Many people might have bought homes, but as you're a new business owner or an existing business owner and you're looking at new space, we're hoping to talk about some of the things that you should look for, some of the pitfalls, and we have a great panel. So Abraham, if you can go to the next slide. A little bit about the background and purpose. The city's economic development department is here to help and assist businesses. And many times, many residents talk about that new business coming to town. For our economic development team, one of the most important things is seeing our local businesses, grow right here. Right? How can a home-based business with 1 employee go to 2 employees, or from 2 to 10, and move from the front room or move from the bedroom to the front room to downtown or somewhere across our city? And that is the purpose of these workshops. Our next workshop will be October 17th, and that's about marketing on a budget. And then in November, we'll have one about the Chamber of Commerce. All of these workshops are being recorded, and you can find them here on this link. And we'll have this link also towards the end of the meeting also. Our economic development team is included with myself, Ricardo Noguera, and Abraham Salinas. We are multilingual, and so if anyone speaks Spanish and needs some assistance, we're also here to help. These are our phone numbers, our direct lines, and emails. And Ricardo Noguera has a wealth of help and will bird dog whatever project you might have. And we'll also help you through the project. And then next slide, Abraham. So let's jump into today's workshop. We have 3 different perspectives and 3 different folks here, and I'll allow each one of them to kind of introduce themselves. Maybe I'll turn it over to you, Sean, to introduce yourself first.
Hi, I'm Sean McCauley, just a local landlord, investor here in Brentwood.
Great. And I wouldn't just say you're just a local landlord. Sean obviously has been prolific, has had a number of businesses, successful businesses that he's been able to sell, and owns a number of properties that are very nice, well maintained, and appreciate all that he does, including the recent redevelopment of our downtown theater, the Delta Theater. So Sean, thanks for all that you do. Matt.
Good morning, everyone. Matt Hagar. I'm a commercial real estate broker by trade, and I've done a lot in this community in East County, and specifically Brentwood, and also lived in this county my entire life. So
great. And thank you,
Darren. Michael's on. He's trying to get in. He needs to be invited. He enlisted him as a spectator.
No, I'm in. Somebody changed it and they invited me as a panelist. So, hey.
And
there he is.
We'll go ahead and turn it over to Michael Hill. He's owner and operator of one of our newest businesses in town. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that business too.
Yeah, hey everybody, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, so I mean, as most of you know, I just opened our latest addition to the Limitless brand, Limitless Axes and Nails in the streets of Brentwood. We're almost 3 months in, and it's going really well. Yeah, Brentwood's been very responsive, and we just love being part of the community. So it's definitely a great place to be.
And Michael, how many facilities do you have
So I also own Limitless Escape Games as well as Limitless Axes and Nails, and each have 3 locations. So we have for Axes and Nails, we have Brentwood, Stockton, and Pleasanton. And then for the escape room, we have Pleasanton, Livermore, and Stockton. So we have 6 locations for like that kind of competitive socializing destination entertainment space.
Right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So Abraham, I think you can take off the slides for right now, right? Or do you have the questions up?
I'll just take down the slides.
Okay.
The questions don't look pretty.
Great. So for everyone who's participating, at the end, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So please just raise your hand. And then if you have a question while we're speaking, you can put it into the chat, and we'll try to include it in some of the questions that we put up here. So Michael, since you're the last one to speak, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Could you maybe talk about how, maybe talk about your first lease, what you've learned since then, and did you do it on your own? Did you go out and hire like a real estate agent or a broker? And what was that thought process? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so when we first opened our escape room, it was like early 2016. We started to think about it, and I came from tech, so I was in like tech sales in the Bay Area. That's kind of what I was doing. And I had no idea about owning a business or what to do with the lease. So then when we got the idea to finally open an escape room, we basically just drove around in a car and just looking for places that like would kind of fit our needs, like what we needed to open the escape room. Really had no idea what we were doing. We found an opening pretty close to our house, called the landlord up. He kind of helped us through. He was really helpful in the process. It was Callahan, based in Livermore. So he actually walked us down, filled out our first business license with us, kind of talked to the city, got us permitted, and like just kind of really steward that whole process. Because I mean, we had no idea what we were doing 10 years ago when we got started. So a good landlord was very helpful for us for our initial enterprise.
And now, compared to your first to your last one, did your last one, was it the same thing? Were you just kind of driving around, find it on your own, reach out to the property owner, or did you, go through a real estate agent to help you?
We used a broker that we've used for the past like 3 or 4 years. He's done a few of our leases, Tim Moody. He was very helpful. I would say anyone that's getting into business, especially if you're going to be like a first-time tenant, a good broker can really help you out and steer you in the right direction. Look out for a bunch of pitfalls, really understand what you need and help you achieve that. So our broker actually brought us the location at the streets of Brentwood. Because I mean, a good broker should be always out there looking, especially because we're always trying to expand. He's always out there talking to other brokers, other property companies, and really just trying to find a space that he knows works for us. So our broker actually brought us the location of streets of Brentwood, which was pretty awesome.
Right. So Sean, let me go to you, since Michael talked a little bit about property owners. I assume you've had a little bit of everything, right? Someone has contacted you directly, they come through a friend, they come through a real estate agent, broker. I'm guessing your phone probably rings almost every day asking you if you have properties. Could you kind of talk about that experience and what's worked best for you as both a business owner and as a landlord?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, I love Michael's first experience with a landlord, and that's what we all try and strive for. Just helping these young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs get going and up and ramped up, because it's such a, nobody goes to school for opening your own business nowadays, and you don't know all those little things. And so that's refreshing to hear. And we try and be that same type of landlord. We do get a lot of calls. We get probably daily calls, such as Matt probably does too. We get calls from Matt and his group, and there's a lot of activity. Fortunately, in Brentwood, Brentwood's a real popular place to be. And so, yeah, I mean, we do get tons of calls. We do screen those, and I think we should talk a little bit about that, because I think people on this particular group want to know what we're thinking, as opposed to just finding a space. And so it's so, in a competitive market like Brentwood is, it's really important to have everything dialed in before you do talk to a landowner or landlord, or even a broker for that matter. The brokers even want to make sure that the entrepreneurs are polished. And so we probably should talk a little bit about that, I hope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll allow Matt to maybe take that. So Matt, what are you looking for when a business comes before you say, hey, whoa, slow down, right? You're not moving into a 10,000 square foot building with just
Sure.
saying that you think you can pay the rent.
We definitely get that a lot. People can be a little overzealous and excited to open their business, and we understand that. And like Sean said, we do like them to be polished, and my version of doing that is typically starting with asking a bunch of questions, making sure that they truly understand what they're about to go through, making sure they have the financial wherewithal. Building out spaces, depending on your use, can be very expensive, and a lot of people don't quite understand that up front. So they think, it might cost 100 grand when really it's 500 grand or something, and so that throws people off a lot. Making sure they have a business plan. One thing that I also think is important is personal guarantees. A lot of landlords are going to require that, and a lot of people don't understand initially, which, you usually sign a lease under a corporation, and if there's no personal guarantee, you have that corporate veil that's kind of a lot more difficult to go after you and your personal assets. But if you sign a personal guarantee, that kind of supersedes the corporation, and so they can come after, your house, your car, things like that. And so those are really important things for people to understand. And yeah, we're talking to landlords and tenants all day, every day. That's what we do. So we talk to people like Sean, understand what space he has, what he wants to see in a tenant, and then everyone else, in the area that's owning property. And so we get a good feel of the overall market and what's going to work and what's not, and we advise accordingly.
So Sean, maybe let me throw it back to you. I know that you have done some, I'll call them non-traditional leases, where you very much try to help out a business. What's the type of information that you're looking for from a business owner before you're willing to sign some type of lease with them?
Yeah, so good question. I feel like there's some intangibles that really affect a landlord's decision. The intangibles might be an entrepreneur's level of business acumen. Do they know their numbers? Do they understand what their percentage of income is to rent? I mean, some really granular things that I feel new entrepreneurs as well as seasoned entrepreneurs, sometimes seasoned entrepreneurs don't even know these numbers. And so typically when we ask these really poignant questions, when we get good answers, it really helps us take the risk on a venture. Even if somebody's opening up a secondary or tertiary location, we put them through the kind of psychological information pipeline that we wanted to make sure, in general, okay, landlords basically just want to make sure that when this 3, 5, 10-year commitment from an entrepreneur is inked, that they're not going to have any problems. Just think of it that way. Landlords don't run around looking for issues to create. They want no issues, and they want to know that that entrepreneur is going to be there for years and is going to be carefree for them. So, a majority of the misconception is that landlords are evil, terrible people, where a majority of us are quite the opposite. We love helping young, good entrepreneurs that want to start a business, as well as ones that want to open up secondary locations, etc. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, is there anything you want to add about that you ran into as information that's being requested from property owners?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, like the first time we had no idea what we were doing. The second location we got, which was in Stockton, we had a really good broker, and again, a phenomenal landlord and property owner that really helped us and kind of took us to the next level. I mean, now we're really dialed in. I mean, we've gone and spoke at like real estate conferences to try to have landlords approach us, which now that's kind of the position we're in, where people are seeking us out saying, hey, we want your businesses in our shopping centers. We know they're successful. But yeah, I mean, now we're polished. We've got, 10 years of history. So we've got the numbers to back it. We know exactly the square footage we want within a range. We know the ask that we're going to ask for the certain types of properties that we're going for. So it's pretty much a complete package. I mean, by now, when we speak to a realtor or a landlord, they know that we know what we're doing. And they, they can shoot us straight, like, yeah, we can meet those, requirements in the middle, or, that's not going to work for us, or let's get creative. But yeah, it's like now we're in a spot where we know exactly what we're looking for. And I think the landlords know that as well. Because
we love that. We absolutely love that when we have somebody like Michael coming in saying, I need this square footage. This is my business model. I'm going to emulate exactly what we do here. That is the golden child of tenants for us. And so remember that type of interaction when you're talking to a landlord or even a broker is super important, just to make sure that they're not developing their business model while you're talking to a landlord or a tenant, or a landlord or a broker. Just because remember, you're always in an interview when you're talking to a broker or a landlord. Just think of it that way. I mean, we're not there to have we're not there to have like this cool conversation with you. We're analyzing you, and we're seeing how much you know about your business. And I'm trying to be real here. I'm not trying to be fake. I'm trying to tell you, hey, this is what we're doing when we're talking to a prospective tenant. Is you are in 100% interview everything that you say or you do. So just be ready. And the other piece of advice that I want to tell people is that it's so important to understand who your landlord is. And with the information highway that we have on the internet nowadays, it's really easy to find out who they are, what type of person, what type of landlord they've been in the past, from reviews to whatever information you could dig up on them. Know them, get to know them, and know who you're talking to as who they are, and who you're talking to before you get there. So that really, I mean, for the most part, as entrepreneurs and new business owners, as well as landlords, a lot of them have egos, and so they love it when you know a lot about them. And if you really want to get a lease and you're competing for with other businesses to get that space, it makes a difference when you do your research.
So
yeah, if I can piggyback something on what Sean's saying, I mean, it really is. It's an interview both ways. Like, it's not just like, oh, you really hope you get this spot, like you really like the location. You do have to interview the landlord as well as a potential tenant. Like, you have to see if it's going to be a good fit. Not only explain like, how you're going to improve the ROI of the center because you're going to bring X amount of customers, and your type of customers will stop and get a Jamba Juice before they come and throw axes or do an escape room, that kind of stuff. But you also want to like kind of see what the landlord's about. What are they offering? Are they active on their social media? Do they really care about their tenants? Do you fit inside their business model for that shopping center? So I think the interview process, like Sean's saying, it goes both ways 100%. So from the tenant side, exactly what Sean said. Definitely get to know your landlord. Make sure it's a fit both ways. Don't just fall in love with the location just because you like it. Make sure that your goals are aligned with the landlords as well, and they're going to help you succeed together.
Right. So Abraham threw out a pro tip, right? Interview your landlord. The interview process goes both ways. And Sean, I appreciate you saying, right, there's so much information out there. And how important it is. Everybody has an ego, right? To at least come in and make sure that you know who's sitting right in front of you. But I think sometimes businesses get laser focused on, oh, I've got a business plan, I need a location, and they fail to look at those type of things. So thank you both. Matt, anything you wanted to add to that conversation?
I mean, it's really the same for us too. Like when I said earlier, I ask a bunch of questions. That's basically my version of an informal interview. I'm vetting that person. I turn away most tenants looking for space, to be very candid with you all, because you're not ready, or, it takes a lot of time and energy for me to invest into a tenant to go find them space. And if I don't think we can get to the finish line at the end of the day, I'm not going to put that energy in. So that's why being prepared and knowing your numbers. If someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I could do 1,000 square feet, or I could do 7,000. I'm like, that's way too big of a range. You don't know your business model. You don't know really what you're looking for. And that's going to be a bad situation for everyone. So it's just the same thing from our angle as well.
Let me change. Well, I've had a couple questions. One question that came up was, what's the biggest need that you're seeing that the businesses are coming and saying, hey, this is the type of space we need here in Brentwood, and are we able to fulfill that, or do we need to, do businesses kind of need to look elsewhere? We just don't have the availability for, be it commercial or office, right? Vacancy rates are very low here in Brentwood. Matt, what are you seeing in the market here?
The higher level trend is exactly what Michael's doing, the more experiential retail, kind of the unique things, the throwing axes, mini golf, escape rooms. I think that's a very large trend that you're seeing all over, and Brentwood is no different. I think we're probably light on quality retail spaces, specifically restaurants. There's a lot of demand that I see from people that want to open restaurants, but restaurants are one of the most expensive to open as far as build out and, kitchens and all that. Everyone wants a second generation kitchen, but that's the problem, is everyone wants one and they're basically are next to zero available. And then people, even with a second gen space, they also underestimate how much work and money it will take. Like, if you're a Mexican restaurant and you go out of business and then you want to, go in there and start selling hamburgers, like you don't just show up and start doing that. There's different modifications and stuff that need to be done. So I would say office, I don't know that there's as much of a need. Office has changed a lot over the last few years, as we all know. So I think there's probably a little more vacancy in the office space than retail. But yeah, I would say things like restaurants, experiential stuff are towards the top of the list.
Right. Let me kind of change a little bit. So let's talk about the different type of leases. I'll have a lot of businesses that'll ask me, well, yeah, I've signed a lease, and I'll say, well, is that a triple net lease? And they really don't know, right? Could you? I don't know who wants to take this one on. The different types of leases and how. I mean, maybe Matt, this is right up your alley, that you could kind of talk about the different types of leases.
Sure, I can get it started. I'm sure Sean will jump in and provide more context, but very simplified, high level. A triple net lease is kind of a fancy way to say that the tenant pays for the expenses of the building, maintenance, property tax, insurance, things like that, and that gets tacked on to the base rent. So it's really an expense reimbursement, essentially. A gross lease is basically the opposite, where a landlord is typically paying for most of that. However, I do want to throw out the caveat with commercial real estate. It is a little Wild West still, and you can say triple net to 10 different people and get 10 different definitions of what it means. And the same with the gross lease. So you need to really dig into the details, because there's even triple net, then there's absolute triple net. It should be triple net, and like things like that you really need to look at to make sure that you know exactly what you're paying and what you're not. And a triple net lease would typically favor the landlord, because the tenant is taking on the expenses, which is a known number, but also the risk of future increases in expenses, which is really more of the big one, because especially the last few years with what inflation's been doing in expenses, a lot of tenants have absorbed probably a much higher amount of expense than they had anticipated when they signed that lease. So that's something to look out for.
So Sean, let me add a question. I'm gonna throw it over to you on this one. So I'm one of your tenants, Sean, and since I'm from the city, I'm a pain. So I'm calling you and I say, hey man, my air conditioning went out and I have a triple net lease. How do you handle it?
Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to say is before you sign that lease, make sure you know exactly what Matt's saying is what's the definition of their triple nets. And so there's tons of different leases out there that are, some people do take care of your air conditioning unit. There's a percentage of maintenance on certain items like the air conditioner, and then over and above that, the landlord pays for. There's tons of different, and it really indicative of the building that you're in, right? And so we, in Brentwood in general, because this is more of a Brentwood forum, we see a lot of modified gross leases. And so, we do a lot of modified gross, and we feel like it's the best thing to do for tenants as well as the landlords. We have a lot of community-based properties, which means, we build a community and everybody pays a CAM and everybody pays a base rent, right? And a load factor. So, and these terms, I know it's really important, I think, for people to know this, just because if they're entering into, again, like a 5 to 10 year deal, know what these things are. Load factors, know what the different types of leases are, like the triple nets. typically you don't see really aggressive triple net leases right now in Brentwood. And a triple net lease basically is, say you have a auto business that has a building and a big lot with cars on it. And that would be a triple net candidate, meaning that operator is in charge of your HVAC, your windows, your doors, you know, the parking lot, landscaping, taxes, and insurance. And so know that you're putting all that into and wrapping it up into a lease. And what people need to understand is there's normally a per square foot amount attached to that. So if you're paying $2 a square foot for the square footage of the building, what is the per square foot average of your triple nets? Is it 30 cents, 40 cents, 75 cents? I've seen some operators like Cardoza properties go up into the $1 per square foot for triple nets. And so I would, and I'm not trying to call out Cardoza. He's great. He's fine. They're large landlords in Brentwood as well, but their triple nets are high, and you can literally have triple nets that put people out of business, which has happened before. And so I want to try and talk about the dirty on this forum, just because I think there is some issues out there that people need to understand, is that when they don't put a cap or a ceiling on triple nets, it's hard to do business. And when you have a new landlord or an operation that is going to do a modified triple net from year to year, depending on what the expenses that they're incurring are. And so I encourage everybody to know, if they get into a triple net lease, get a broker like Matt or somebody that, can walk you through it. As far as other leases, Google, I love Google, right? Google is our information highway. And Google what modified gross leases are, get to know them, see what the landlord's offering you, and understand what CAMs are, common area maintenance, understand all these terms and acronyms, because it really shows a lot that these things when you are talking to a landlord. It puts us in a very comfortable position that we're able to communicate effectively with them.
Sean, when you mentioned CAMs or common area maintenance charges, Ricardo and I were at a conference, and we were talking with a very large developer that has, hundreds of millions of dollars of properties. And they said they're getting to a point where they're approaching a CAM charge that's the same amount as their square footage charge. And so I'm glad you mentioned that and the importance of that. Michael, is there anything else you want to add, to this discussion as it relates to the different type of leases? I'm guessing you might have both gross and triple net type leases.
Yeah, I think out of our 6 leases, everyone's different. Everyone's different and kind of customized. So
do you kick yourself and say, man, I wish I had done, well, I assume on all your leases, there's probably like, oh man, I wish I had done one more thing here, one more thing there.
For a few of them, for sure. But yeah, we've negotiated some pretty good deals. But overall, again, it's like, it's finding the right landlord that's going to work with you. Like, no landlord, I don't think, wants to put you out of business by charging you too much for triple nets or CAM charges or anything. So you kind of got to go in with the expectation, which circles back, know your business really well. What can you afford? And then make sure that there isn't a scenario that's going to surprise you down the road 5 years from now where, okay, wow, your CAM's as much as your rent per square footage or something like that. Just make sure you know your business, what you can afford, and make sure you negotiate that at the time, because you don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. You don't know if there's going to be a pandemic, crazy inflation. You have no idea. So just prepare yourself as best you possibly can.
So here's a good question that came in, and I'm sure Michael and Sean will have a lot to say about this. So I'll just read it. It says, what considerations should a new business owner plan for licensing, permitting, zoning they said specifically Brentwood, in any location? Michael, any lessons you've learned as relates to the government process and the difficulties and the time and the cost associated with that?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is, again, you never know how long something will take. I mean, our situation, Brentwood, was extremely long, much longer than we thought, for a multitude of factors. one of the main things, I mean, I've seen people in my business because, you know, I talk to a lot of people that own escape rooms, axe-ray businesses, other entertainment types of businesses. They've literally gone out of business because they didn't negotiate like rent-free periods. So like while you're in the permitting process, like you can't be paying rent. Like that's a huge thing if you're a tenant, especially if you have these like build-ups, you're a restaurant, or you're like me, we're pretty much any place we go into, we're gutting it and we're building it custom for what we need, whether we're installing a bar, a kitchen, throwing up axe ranges, putting in crazy electronics and escape rooms. It's all very custom, and you don't really know how long it's going to take. So don't make yourself go broke and start paying rent before you even have money coming in, because for some reason those permits could take an extremely long time that you're just not even prepared for. So just negotiate that and be prepared to like weather the storm essentially.
Sean, you have a lot of experience with this. Anything can add?
Yeah, the first thing I'm going to say is when you're going to do a build out like Michael did, get a broker, because they're going to negotiate the best deal for you. They know how long certain things take in different cities. And doing a TI, as everybody has done one before, knows that it's just the biggest root canal you ever want to go through to open up your business. And it's important that you have a good team. The landlord understands what you have to go through. The broker understands what kind of type of time frame you need. Go do your due diligence before you even sign a lease with the city to see what it's going to take to get that place built out. What you're going to have to go through is going to have to be a CUP process, which is about 3 months. Is it going to be after that, you know, obviously the planning and the building permit process is going to be X amount of time in different cities. So yeah, negotiate plenty of time, like Michael's saying, into your leases, just because, you know, we understand that that is just a money drain. Also, I feel like people need to get a broker simply because they need to negotiate a, you know, a per square foot add back to that the landlord will pay. So what does that look like? Sometimes it's I say they hover, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm off a little bit. It hovers maybe $20 a square foot, depending on what needs to be done there. Is it a vanilla shell? Is it a cold shell? Are they bringing it to cold? Are they bringing it to vanilla shell? Or you bring it to vanilla shell? There's all kinds of really important things that if you don't have a good team behind you, you can really make some pretty big mistakes.
So a couple acronyms Sean used, TI, tenant improvements. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that. And CUP, also known as a root canal, conditional use permit, which usually requires what's called a discretionary act of the local agency. And in the case here in Brentwood, conditional use permits go to the Planning Commission. And as long as no one contests that, it'll be approved. There's 10 days. If it's contested, it could go to the city council. A great example is recently we had conditional use permit for a drive-through. It was approved by the Planning Commission. It was called up to the city council, and then it was denied. So even though you might meet certain requirements, that can be denied because it's a discretionary act of the local agency. And so, and one of the things I just want to say is if you're doing something here locally and you're going through the process, it's first time or your 100th time, please contact Ricardo, Abraham, or I, and we'll try to help you through the process and be an advocate internally. And Sean can give you lots of examples of where things take just way more time than anyone ever could imagine. And when it comes to this stuff, time is money. And as Michael said, you know, the last thing you want to do is be paying rent for, be it 2 weeks or 2 years, when you're not opening, getting any type of revenue coming through the door.
And one more. Oh, go ahead, Matt. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So just piggyback on a couple of things that were said that I think, from my perspective, would help. So Sean's comment about the TIs are man, can those vary so much depending on who the tenant is, who the landlord is, the credit behind the tenant, how many locations, what type, you know, if it's retail or restaurant or office, it could be very different. You know, I've done deals recently where the TI was $100 a foot, which is a substantial TI. And I've done ones at $10 a foot or zero. Landlords are like, sorry, you're on your own. Or they'll give you free rent in lieu of, right? Because a lot of landlords would rather not receive income than write checks. The math is still the same, but it's a lot better to not spend money than to just not get money, kind of thing, if that makes sense. So so the TI can vary a lot. You need to understand that, you need to know. And then the broker, you know, Sean said get a broker several times. I would take that even farther, and I would say get the right broker. There's a lot of us out there, and we're not all created equal. I may be the best fit for you, and I may not be. And you need to interview the broker in exchange when they're interviewing you. And if you're looking to open a restaurant in Brentwood, you should probably work with a broker that's opened a restaurant in Brentwood, not someone that leases offices in Pleasanton, you know, because there's going to be certain nuances of that deal and that market. And you could really get yourself in a situation because they don't know the local nuances or the asset class. So make sure you're getting with the right person. And also, you really should get a broker. And I'm not saying that because I am a broker, but the different things that we can do for you. And also, one of the best parts of hiring us is you're not actually really hiring us because we're typically paid by the landlord. So you usually get all of our knowledge and experience and services for free, basically, because we're usually getting compensated on the landlord side. So there's really not much reason to not get someone in your corner that knows the system and going to bat for you.
Which is completely unfair, Matt.
I know Sean would love that comment.
Yeah, if I could just say from a tenant standpoint, I avoid a CUP more than just about anything in the world. Like if I had a choice between a less quality property going through the CUP process, I would choose the less quality property, in my opinion. We've had some really bad experience with it. Not in Brentwood. I mean, one of the reasons why we chose a location in Brentwood and all of our future locations will never do a CUP because it just streamlines the process. If you're just good to go, you don't have to, you know, talk with anyone in the city, which I'm sure some are great. I've had experiences where some are not. Yeah, I mean, it was a death sentence for one of our locations where it set us back a year, not Brentwood. And then all kinds of like crazy restrictions that made absolutely no sense because once it goes to city council, they can impose just about anything they want on it. So if you're a tenant out there and you're listening, try to avoid a CUP as much as possible, especially when you're dealing with something like I'm dealing with, which is a lot of people didn't necessarily know about escape rooms in 2016. We were one of the first axe places to open up like 3-4 years ago. So yeah, especially if it's an unknown, don't go through the CUP process unless you really have no other choice. And then also from tenant side, when it comes to like the TI, we prefer to take like higher rent and take the cash because we can obviously write off rent charges. Just like how they said landlords probably don't want to just, you know, take in a bunch of cash and they'd rather give you free rent. But we've signed leases where we've done a kind of a balance, you know, where it's like, sure, we need a little bit of cash to get the project off the ground, and we'll take some in free rent. So again, just figure out what works for you and what both of you can live with.
Those are great points, Michael. So I'm going to open it up for some questions. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, ask questions, please get ready. But I want to ask one other question. So Matt, there's many times that I'll talk with a business owner and they're like, hey, I saw a sign on the corner and you know, I called them and now they want to represent both the property owner and them as the tenant. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions or feelings about having a broker that's both representing the leasee and the leaseor?
I mean, partially back to what I just said about finding the right person. I think regardless if they're representing a landlord or not, you need to make sure they're the right person to help you. And there is some good and bad to that, to be honest. You know, like if I'm representing a landlord and then I'm also representing a tenant, I know the landlord very well because I've worked with them most likely for years. And so I know their tendencies. I know what they like in a deal. I know what they don't like in the deal, much more than if I'm just kind of riding around with a tenant, writing offers on to landlords that we're not really as familiar with. So I can get a lot more, I guess, accurate and creative on writing offers that will be well received, if you will, because I know the landlord's intentions. But then there's also the reality that, you know, you need to know where the loyalties lie a little bit too, because it is kind of a unique position to be negotiating essentially in the middle for landlord and tenant. And so you need to make sure that you're getting, fair representation, and maybe they're not, the landlord is the broker's uncle or something, like you just don't know. So you need to make sure that that's not happening.
Any other comments, Sean or Michael, on that? It's okay if you don't. Let me ask another question as it relates to kind of mix of Sean, when you have a property, are you considering like, hey, I don't want 2 insurance agents or 2 real estate agents, or 2 of the same type of restaurants in the same facility? Do you restrict uses or put things in your lease that restrict people from doing certain things because they might have competing product within your buildings?
Yeah, 100% we do. We try and build, for a landlord, I mean, building a really good community, for instance, in a retail shopping center. We've had good success with the ones that we've purchased where you just have a balance, right? So you don't have 3 insurance agents in one one shopping center, like you're saying. You could, but what you want to do in really healthy shopping centers is have a balance of all different, varieties of businesses, right? Restaurants to dessert places to entertainment and on into there's just retail. It's just a good mix. We like to have a good mix in that in specific shopping centers. In more community-based environments that we create, we can have 3 real estate agents in one little spot, and there is some synergy there that happens. And so some of the salon studios that we created, having synergy amongst the different beauty industry profiles is really important to have different varieties of under the same umbrella of the beauty and health and beauty, but they do different things. So yeah, it's definitely a big consideration when we're looking at tenancy there.
Right. And Michael, have you ran up to that, or do you want to include something like that in your lease so that you don't have another, axe throwing place or escape room immediately adjacent to one of your facilities?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it's not very likely that someone would open up in the same place. But yeah, we've experienced it kind of in the reverse. I mean, even take the streets of Brentwood, for example. There were certain things about like not having arcade games or, certain types of things because like the movie theater had a clause. We got an exception to it because obviously it's like not our main focus of business. Like we're not running an arcade. It's just like a little extra to the experience when they come. So you also have to be aware of that when you're signing leases too, that there's not these exclusions that are going to get you in trouble down the road. Also, if you ever want to have any flexibility in your business as well, because like some will flat out say like, you can't make tacos because there's 2 other taco places in there. So you just have to know that going in, because if you were planning, if we were ever planning to change to make tacos, we wouldn't even be allowed to. So as a tenant, just make sure you look for those pitfalls. Again, work with a great broker and they should be able to help you out with that too and ask those questions like, are you sure you're always going to have burgers? Are you ever going to switch your cuisine? Because you're not allowed to do Greek food. And you're like, okay, yeah, all right. So just know all those things so you know what you can do when you operate your business.
Yeah, I'm glad you both brought that up. I would say so. Any of these shopping centers, just as for the group, they're all putting restrictions on what you can or cannot do. Anytime you see any of the national chains, they all have very common language that they want included. For example, I'll use Panda Express, right? They want an exclusion for sushi because there might be the idea that they might have sushi someday. If there's a grocery store, right? People always ask, well, why don't we have one of these wine stores in one of our big shopping centers? And hey, there's an opening next to Rayleigh's. Well, guess what? Rayleigh's has an exclusion that is part of their lease that does not allow for any other type of competing wine business without them signing off on it. So it's really, really important. Make sure that your lease has the information that you want in it. And like everybody said, a broker can definitely help you on that. So I haven't had anybody raise their hand. So let me ask, I have one last question, or Abraham, Ricardo, if you have another question, please do. Actually, you know what? William just raised his hand. So give me a second. Let me allow him to talk and he can, oh, go ahead. Let's see. William, go ahead. Did you get it?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I have a question regarding, well, let me explain the situation. I own a franchise business. My wife and I actually own 17 locations throughout the greater Bay Area, and we have one in Brentwood, and we're very happy. We bought the business. It was an existing business. We bought it about a year ago. Our lease is coming up, and we're in one of those situations where the CAM charges are almost equal to our base rent. And as a comparison kind of situation, I actually have locations in Mountain View and Palo Alto and Redwood City, right in the middle of Silicon Valley, and I'm actually paying more in Brentwood for similar sized location for the same type of business. So I'm thinking of moving within Brentwood, of course. And my question is, if in fact I move the location, do I obviously would still have to go through the planning process, I assume, for the permitting and all that, but would it be basically starting from scratch as if I was a new business, even though I'd been in Brentwood for 15 years? And would that be something that is streamlined within the city, or is it one of those things where I basically start from scratch, so I have to kind of bake that into my planning?
So let me take a shot at it, and then people can join in. If you're an existing business, it's allowed in another place. You could just transfer your business license. Also speaking open and honestly, it's not really a business license. It's a business operational tax certificate. So really what the city's doing is we're taxing you for doing business within the city. But yes, there is a streamlined process for that. You can just change the location. If you're going from, one area to another, obviously, as everyone talked about, you need to understand the zoning. You need to understand the general plan designation. You need to understand parking. And there could be some things there that would require you to start the process over. But I'd say reach out to myself and Ricardo, and we can help you through that process. And we don't want you to start all over, but there's definitely a process. And we're trying to always make improvements, but we're definitely not perfect. But please reach out to us.
Okay, great. So as I move down the path here, I'll definitely reach out to you guys first just to kind of explain the details, and that way determine what I need to do or not do to move the business.
Great. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
Can I just add something there? I mean, if you can't negotiate, I don't know where you're at or what kind of business you have, but if you could try to negotiate with your landlord, if you are somewhat of an anchor where you're at, I mean, I think there might be some room there depending on who it is. There's a lot of landlords don't want to see a really established business leave, and so you might have a little bit of opportunity to negotiate your lease in this next term, which maybe you already have. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there was a question that got brought up, and I didn't ask it because I think it's really difficult to answer. Someone said, "Could you tell us what the going lease rates are in the area?" I'll give you the answer that everybody's going to say. It depends. But Matt, maybe could you maybe give an idea of, if I was just looking for, a small office for a few people versus maybe a retail center, kind of what are some going rates out there, and what are kind of the timeframes? Are people able to do short-term leases, or is there some, and what do you define as short-term, and are there some long-term leases out there?
Yeah, so the abbreviated answer is it depends, it depends, it depends. But however, to try to elaborate a little more, every asset class is different as far as a retail lease or an office lease or an industrial lease. Location is obviously very important, where you are, the age of the building, exposure. I mean, there's so many factors and quite a wide range. Like major generalities, I would say that, maybe a retail space might start roughly in the $2 a foot range plus triple net. But it could go up. I've seen $5, $6 a foot plus triple net in Brentwood for a smaller space. Office, is a little more depressed right now, depending. You can pay a decent amount, $2 plus $2.50, or you can pay, $1.50 or something a foot for, more of a very basic office space. One thing too that I'll mention on rental rates is a lot of it depends too on the length of the lease and the TIs, because if you're asking for money, I have landlords that they'll give it to you, but they're just going to add it on to the lease. And so they're going to amortize it over whatever that term is. So if you're spending X amount of dollars, or the landlord is on your behalf, and it's spread out over, say, a 3-year term versus a 5-year term, you know, that's going to be a lower monthly burden over 5 years, right? And they also might be more likely to invest more in for a longer term, right? Because a landlord, their perspective is, you know, how long am I getting this income for? What's the security of it, right? Versus 1 year versus 5 years, or even 10 years. And so the longer it is, the more secure it is, the more likely they're willing to help and contribute. And also the economics change depending on the term.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I think we've kind of got to the end. I heard it here. Michael Hill wants to open up an escape room in Brentwood. Or at least we're as we're on here, you might have seen Ricardo put up a question like, "Hey, when are we going to get an escape room?" So Ricardo's never he never rests. So we hope that Access Ales does extremely well, and that you'll continue to grow your business here. So we appreciate all that you do. What I'll do is I'll have Abraham. Maybe you can put up the slides with everyone's contact information. And I'll turn it over to each one of you if you want. If you had any closing words, maybe I'll start with Michael. Then after that, we'll go Sean and then Matt.
Yeah, to anyone watching, they're going to put my contact information up. But if you're a business starting out, or if you're a long time business and you have any questions, I'm happy to help. You know, all ships rise in a tide. So just reach out. Happy to help everybody. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Sean.
Yeah, you know, the environment in Brentwood's, it's a tough environment to lease right now. Our vacancy is low, and I really hope new building and new commercial construction is going to break loose a little bit, and we'll have more office, warehouse, flex use stuff coming aboard. But yeah, it's a hard market right now, and so it's competitive. And I encourage you guys to just don't get discouraged if you're looking for a space or the perfect location for your businesses out there. It'll happen. Things change daily in this industry, and so don't give up. Keep on looking, get good brokers out there, communicate with good landlords, keep in touch with these people, and something will break loose eventually. Nobody knows what you guys want unless you go out there and you tell everybody. There's no such thing as luck. It's all about you guys telling people what you need, and then eventually it'll come to you.
And Matt?
Yeah, for me, you know, I'm here to help. I'm here to be a resource. If anyone has any questions, my number's up on, you can call me anytime. Whether we work together or not doesn't really matter. You know, I talk to a lot of people that I don't work with, and I do my best to try to get them going in the right direction and help them, you know, whatever they need, answer questions, etc. You know, just for the good of them and their business, and for the good of Brentwood and the community. You know, I don't mind helping at all, regardless of, you know, what the arrangement is. So feel free to reach out anytime if you guys have questions.
Great. Well, you heard it here. All three are willing to work and help you out. That's one thing I love about entrepreneurs. I think that they're always willing to share information. I know Sean has a couple books, DNA of an Entrepreneur, and the other one, Service. What's the second book, Sean?
Service to Sell.
Service to Self, right? Great information in both of those books. And please reach out and hit up these folks. There was one question that just came in late, which was, do I have the ability to negotiate at my existing lease rate? I'd say you always have a willing to, you know, you can always ask, but just like everything, the cost is going up for property owners, and just like you might be increasing your cost to a customer, assume that a property owner is going to want to increase their cost also, as it's that time. But you can definitely ask for that, and that was a great question. So Ricardo, Abraham, anything you have left that you'd like to add?
I am serious about the escape room. I helped open one up in downtown Tacoma. I think it would be very good for the folks in Brentwood. Thank you, Michael, and thanks, Sean and Matt.
Sean, call me.
And I just wanted to throw it out here as well. Our next workshop will be on October 17th, and it'll be marketing on a budget. We'll have some professionals giving you some tips And then to follow will be the Chamber of Commerce. Some businesses don't realize they are a valuable business partner and networking resource. And as usual, we'll have the recording available on the website. You'll get a follow-up email after this, and we'll also have the slides available and the recording. And feel free to reach out to us as well.
Great. So thank you, everyone, and appreciate your time. And this will be up on YouTube soon, and then our social media channels. And I know some people have heard me say this before, but I truly believe it. A city can only be as strong as the businesses that we have. And I believe the reason that we have a community like Brentwood is because the businesses that are here and the business areas and sectors. What we have downtown, what Sean has done there is absolutely amazing. To think that a community has as many events downtown, I can tell you every city is jealous of what Brentwood has downtown, and they're jealous of what's at the streets of Brentwood. They're jealous that we're getting a new owner in Center Cal at the streets of Brentwood, and they're jealous that we have local brokers like Matt that were born and raised here and have sunk their business here and have hopefully some cool new projects that Matt will hopefully be talking about sometime soon. So Sean, Matt, Michael, thank you for your time, and we'll see everybody next month.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you all.
Thank you.